Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Let me begin by saying that unfortunately Councillor Sally Birch is unable to be here today as she has COVID. She has done a considerable amount of research into clean air zones and met with people who will be adversely impacted by its introduction. This is what Councillor Birch was going to say had she been able to attend today. I'm sure that nobody in the Bradford district would argue that cleaner air is not a key aim for our residents and visitors. This should, however, not be achieved at all costs, and the costs are where our thoughts differ with those of the Labour Council's proposed charging principles. The charge will not just be a monetary burden for small businesses, including our large number of taxi drivers. The cost will be felt in possible increase in the cost of goods delivered to Bradford homes and businesses, personal financial hardship for those small businesses for whom the available grants still do not make the purchase of a compliant vehicle affordable, possible job losses as small businesses look for other ways to reduce fixed costs, increased traffic on the roads just outside the clean air zone, adding to congestion and pollution and road safety concerns. We are calling for the charging clean air zone, which was due to start in January, that was formulated by the Council and agreed by the Government, to be amended into a non-charging clean air zone. The Clean Air Zone framework, issued in February 2020, states 3 outcomes which a CAZ should deliver. 1, supporting local growth and ambition. 2, accelerating the transition to a low-emission economy. And 3, immediate action to improve air quality and health. Given that Bradford's Clean Air Zone has been idling, more of that later, with there now being no definite start date and therefore more confusion and worry for people trying to buy compliant vehicles, one could argue that words like accelerate and immediate have already become redundant. 80% of HGVs in West Yorkshire are now estimated to be compliant with the required standard, and I am informed that 75% of Bradford licensed taxis are compliant, and there has been considerable investment to make all buses compliant, while sales of electric cars continue to rise. This has to have a positive impact on air quality, and this pattern is likely to continue as confidence grows in electric cars. There are, of course, other measures that are being taken locally, for example with the Council purchasing electric vehicles for their own use and installing more charging points. There is also the Bradford Shipley Route Improvement Scheme due to begin next year, which is intended to reduce congestion and improve air quality. So if that achieves its aims, that should negate the need for a clean air zone in this area. It is disappointing that the feasibility study into the option for a Shipley Eastern bypass new road structure still has not been done, despite over £300,000 of government money having been given to the Council for this very study over 3 years ago. New road options should be looked at in the round before any charging clean air zone is decided upon. Who knows what a Shipley bypass might deliver in terms of improved traffic flow? Sadly, that question cannot be answered as the Council have failed to do the required study, despite being reminded about it on several occasions. The Government's Clean Air Framework clearly states, in implementing a clean air zone, local authorities will need to consider the impact on local residents and the need for any mitigating measures. They will also need to take action as necessary to support growth and protect the economy of their local high streets and town centres, whilst ensuring that their clean air zone proposals will not result in the displacement of the most polluting vehicles away from town centres to surrounding areas. We are not convinced that this has happened, and we fear that the introduction of the charging zone will lead to extremely damaging unintended consequences. It risks freight operators moving out of Bradford, which would impact negatively on the local economy, or it could cause them to take different routes, harming our smaller villages and towns, which have roads far less suited to heavy traffic and are closer to residential properties. Or operators may choose not to deliver to Bradford at all due to the increased costs, which again harms the economy or increases charges for Bradford customers. None of these options are positive for the district, and especially given no other local authorities in West Yorkshire have a clean air zone, if it goes ahead, it will act as a disincentive for businesses to locate here or expand their businesses because of these increased costs. The Clean Air Zone framework asks local authorities to consider other mitigators before opting for charges, options such as requesting full enforcement powers to tackle the polluting and antisocial practice of engine idling. I'm sure all councillors present today receive many complaints about this, particularly outside our schools. Section 3.1 of the framework also requests full consideration of the implications of any traffic displaced to surrounding areas. Many of the surrounding areas comprise of B roads, snaking through small but well-populated rural villages and communities with poor traffic calming and no automatic number plate recognition presence. If we think this practice will not happen, let me tell you that Waze, the world's largest community-based sat-nav app, now has an app which can be used to avoid clean air zone roads in towns and cities in the United Kingdom, and thus directing those HGVs and other vehicles to the very roads I've just mentioned. I have had concerns expressed from taxi drivers who often bring customers to Bradford, hopefully people who will be shopping here or visiting our museums or theatres, but if the taxi driver is licensed in Leeds or Halifax or Huddersfield, then they cannot apply for a grant and must pay the charge. This will doubtless result in an increase in taxi costs for visitors to the city and is a clear disincentive to travel here. The same principle will apply to deliveries of goods from companies based outside of Bradford. They will either seek an alternative route, which will add time and increase use of fuel, or they will pass on the cost of the clean air zone to their Bradford customer. A lose-lose situation. As ward councillors, we are probably all contacted by residents concerned about drivers using minor routes which are less suitable for heavy traffic, with concerns about pedestrian safety and pollution in residential areas. Other councils have introduced non-charging clean air zones or have taken different approaches to reducing emissions. For example, Leeds recently scrapped their clean air zone and Manchester have agreed to do a full revision of their CAZ plans and delay any introduction. If other councils can do this, why can't Bradford? We accept that the funding deal for upgrading vehicles is very generous, but this is another reason not to introduce a charging zone, as if these incentives are so good, then people will naturally want to upgrade their vehicles, whether there is a clean air zone or not. In summary, we support measures to improve air quality across the district, but we would like to see more openness about the current air quality figures, how these compare to the figures taken in 2018, and given the changes post-COVID and natural progression towards cleaner, greener vehicles, plus the use of grants to upgrade vehicles, why can't we follow the example of many other councils in going back to the government with new proposals that will achieve cleaner air, but without all the damaging consequences of introducing a charging clean air zone? Councillor Birch has also sent through a couple of points in response to the Labour amendment. Firstly, she says, the leaders should be aware that Client Earth have been given permission to take court action against the government for alleged failure to tackle climate change, absolutely not specifically in regard to the provision of clean air zones. These are distinctly different, and indeed one of our concerns is that by attempting to use charging tactics, then the clean air can be achieved in one location to the absolute detriment of another location. Secondly, she states that the information on the Board in Bradford website freely confirms there is little evidence whether these policies improve air quality or health, so to draw firm parallels between clean air and the respiratory health of our children is not possible. That is the end of Councillor Birch's speech, but I just wanted to make a few additional comments on the Labour amendment. You say there was never a go-live date of October 2021, and yet this was given as the date the Clean Air Zone was meant to go live at a council presentation I attended in Shipley Library over 2 years ago. I took a photo of this information because it also included pledges to introduce an electric vehicle home charge scheme, a workplace charging scheme and a cycle to work scheme, but we have heard nothing further about these proposed schemes. There have also been delays in providing local businesses with details on applying for exemptions. I've had a number of residents contact me about this, as they want to do the right thing, but they need to plan ahead and are unable to do so because the information isn't available. We were recently told that the launch of the exemptions programme would be at the end of February, but this didn't happen. Then the date of 14th of March was given. Then in answer to a member's question today, it says this month, but looking at your amendment, it is now not until the beginning of April. Nobody's underestimating the health imperatives, but you seem to be implying that the reason a fifth of children have a wheezing disorder is because they are breathing in poor quality air, when we know there are many other factors, such as smoking, and also many children naturally grow out of this and it doesn't develop into asthma. You mentioned writing to 17,000 businesses as part of the consultation, but what did they say? I have been contacted by a small business in Queensbury which sits outside the clean air zone, but he buys his materials from inside the zone. Given the majority of his work is in the Halifax area, he is now looking for a new supplier. I presume he would be eligible for an exemption, but he feels it is simpler and easier for him to change suppliers. I've also spoken to a friend living in Low Moor who uses a taxi company based in Halifax, so she says instead of having nights out in Bradford, they will now go to Halifax instead. These changes will inevitably impact on the viability of businesses within the clean air zone and will impact on the city centre, which we are trying to encourage people to support. We urge you to support our motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, members of Council. It's the clean air zone, and yet again misinformation and the rumour mill jumps into action, and I feel a deja vu from last summer. When I was elected to Council, I signed a declaration to represent and do the best for the district and its residents, something I think that some members need to remember. Sometimes that means doing the right thing even when it might not be easy. We have been directed by the government to implement the clean air zone as soon as possible due to poor air quality, and that's been regularly reported on. This and like many other councils around the country have been instructed to do so. Bath, Birmingham, Portsmouth, Oxford and many others coming on board soon. And just a point of clarification, the government is still monitoring the air quality in Leeds, which isn't as good as it should be or could be. It is clearly a national picture. The government has had to take action to clean up our air, and that's why we are seeing the introduction of so many clean air zones the length and breadth of the country. There's no arguing with the data. It's readily available, and only in summer of last year I stood in this chamber and spoke about the impact of poor air quality on residents of our district of both young and old. And I will question anyone who didn't think that our communities deserve to breathe better, good quality air, something that we all need to sustain life, and it should surely be a basic human right. Poor air quality leads to lifelong health problems, and anyone who has witnessed someone suffering from an asthma attack or other breathing difficulty and sees the distress that they and those around them feel when somebody is gasping for breath is quite unbelievably distressing. We struggle and argue against such a strong action on this. Hospital admissions are in the region of 370 per week, all linked to respiratory illnesses, COPD and heart conditions. We have in this district more than 1 in 5 children who have a wheezing disorder, as you've kindly pointed out. And when we debated the CAZ last summer, I made reference to the impacts on the unborn child, where nitrogen and dioxide and particulate matter from the air we breathe passes through the placenta and affects the developing baby. This then predetermines the lifelong health impacts on that unborn child. You'll see from our motion that we are myth-busting because there are some deliberate pieces of misinformation being spread out there, and it's time to talk about the facts. Point of correction, we now have 84% of the taxi fleet that are meeting the CAZ compliance standards, 317 buses that are being upgraded, no residents in Bradford district are being charged when using their private vehicle. There are sunset periods for businesses that have been upgraded and the vehicles are on order. Bradford has secured the best value grants in the UK from the government because we have stated such a strong case in support of businesses upgrading their vehicles. We've listened and consulted with residents and businesses, and we have taken points on board and gone back to the government on numerous occasions. We wrote to 17,000 businesses as part of the consultation. We haven't sat back. We have been forthright in asking for more money from government and in asking if we could revert to a non-charging zone when we were told no, because there was zero chance that we would achieve the legal levels of air quality. The timescales to introduce the clean air zone are due to the fact that the government had many other clean air zones coming into being, and they wanted their IT systems to be able to cope with the data feeds and systems. It is the government that set the date of implementation. Trying to compare the size of Bradford's clean air zone with that of Greater Manchester, which is 493 square miles, is incomprehensible and disingenuous to do so. We also have a totally different levels of business support setting our CAZ apart from any other. Our clean air zone will bring our air quality within the law. It will improve health, and it is providing the best levels of grant to support businesses anywhere in the country. Deputy Lord Mayor, I commend our amendment to the Chamber.
Thank you. Councillor Nathan.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I would like to thank Councillor Birch for proposing this important motion, urging Bradford Council to pause plans for the clean air zone immediately while this is thoroughly reviewed. As a result of the pandemic, the last 2 years has caused a significant amount of pressure on individuals and our local businesses who have strived really hard to be able to continue trading, who are now having to face additional pressure making sure their vehicles are CAZ compliant or face a daily charge. These proposals will impact constituents while simply doing their jobs. I would just like to share with the Council a short story about a taxi driver who has been affected firsthand by these proposals. Mr. X was a taxi driver for some 15 years up until March 2020 when the lockdown was first introduced. Due to there being no work in the taxi trade, he then joined Uber Eats delivering food so that he can continue to pay his mortgage and bills. He asked the department to put a hold on his vehicle licence. When returning to the trade a few months ago, he was told that his vehicle is no longer compliant and he would therefore require a new compliant vehicle for which he is eligible to apply a grant for. He quickly purchased a vehicle knowing the price of vehicles is continuously rising. He then applied for this grant retrospectively and sent all the requested information to the department. He recently has received an email which said as follows: "Thank you for your grant application which I received. Unfortunately, after assessing your application, you are not eligible for a clean air zone grant. You do not meet the eligibility criteria for this grant as you are not operating as a driver. We are therefore unable to consider you for a clean air zone grant on this occasion." These are the kind of responses people are receiving for trying to keep a roof over their head and provide for their family. Leeds City Council were due to launch the Leeds CAZ in January 2020, and I've seen the Labour amendment, and I've seen they've given the reasons why that is. But a similar initiative was set to be introduced in Manchester. However, this has also been delayed and is now under review. I would like to second this motion and call upon the leader to take similar action, but at least in the interim period to look at the grant processes in place. I would just like to urge the Council to look at the grants process to make it easier for individuals who are applying for these grants, so it will make it easier for them. Thank you.
Councillor Sajmal.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. If you can please relay my best wishes to Councillor Shabir on a speedy recovery. Deputy Lord Mayor, I welcome and support the call to review the CAZ in Bradford, something the taxi trade and businesses have been calling for since the very beginning. Over the past couple of years, I've been contacted by a number of my constituents in the taxi trade and business owners, informing me of the poor consultation process that took place, lack of clarity and no support in completing it. Speaking with business owners employing less than 250 staff, they didn't even know that they could apply for an exemption on a vehicle. For taxi trade, the CAZ means a taxi driver to work some time before he could cover the cost of the CAZ. even before he earned a living. This extra cost will be passed on to customers, some of my constituents have told me. So a non-chargeable CAZ would benefit drivers massively if there is an option to do that. The taxi drivers of Bradford have had a difficult 2 years through the pandemic, but they kept going, providing a vital service to people in this district. They couldn't work from home and earn a living for their families like others could. Instead, they made sure our nurses, teachers and other public service staff got to work throughout the COVID period. I witnessed this firsthand, how some taxi drivers went the extra mile to provide food parcels to their elderly and vulnerable customers during COVID. We should, if anything, respect, value our taxi drivers, support them and recognise the vital service they provide to our local economy. It is inevitable that drivers will use other routes to avoid the CAZ charges if they can, which will impact highly on populated residential streets as a result. I would request the Council to review and examine the air quality in Bradford again to see if it has improved since COVID, especially now that we have more electric taxi vehicles in the district and a new electric fleet of buses. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stubbs.
Thank you again, Deputy Lord Mayor. The clean air zones. So I think the priority for all of us in this chamber has to be the health and well-being of the citizens across the district, above and beyond everything else. And yes, we make mitigations, and while I respect Councillor Davies' gymnastics of claiming that simultaneously almost everything is already compliant, but somehow this is an incredible burden, we have to accept that clean air for our children, for our citizens, is the priority. So it's a shame, really, that what we're doing today is debating a motion on clean air zones again, before all of the information is out there. Most of it is, but before all of the advertising is finished, before the deadlines are met, before anybody yet has been given an exemption. They can only apply for one in advance at the moment. But we're debating this, and it's a real shame for us as Liberal Democrats to see this happening, for no other reason than because the blue and the red teams here want to kick a political football around. It doesn't help inform anybody who may or may not be able to apply for exemptions. It doesn't help anybody who may be charged as part of their business, and it doesn't help anybody in the district get cleaner air tomorrow. It just doesn't. So it is a shame. It's a real shame. You know, we can argue all day alongside the Labour Party that the government sends out mixed messages, delays its response to things, cuts its advertising budget. We've had ministers in the last few weeks openly saying clean air zones are a terrible and horrific imposition on anybody, despite the fact their government says these clean air zones must be implemented. And at the end of the day, it is the government's responsibility to make sure that regulations are followed throughout the country. But it's also reasonable, I think, to say that yet again we have another example of the Labour leadership in Bradford failing to take people with them, to be honest. You've like the COVID cycle lanes a few years ago that were implemented at speed, didn't take people with us. We now have lots of people angry about them. They're underused. We don't know anything about whether or not they'll still be there in the future. And it's a real shame, because actually implementing things like that, like the clean air zone, will benefit the health of the district, but we'll have lost the argument with the general public because we've either spent too much time fighting in this chamber about it, or because we haven't spent the time explaining why it's needed, what its purpose is, and how we'll all benefit from it in the future. Finally, I'd just say that when people make the claims that the world is going to end when something changes, I just would remind everybody that minimum wages were going to decimate businesses, and I don't believe that happened. Banning smoking in public places was going to make the whole world in England a horrible, miserable place to exist. It did not happen. Sometimes we have to step up and take decisions and say the better health of people trumps many things. There are lots of mitigations in this scheme. I would prefer us to be debating in this chamber today the merits of a scheme and without arguing amongst each other with false claims here, there and everywhere, why it is that this scheme should be implemented. So I think it's a shame we're wasting that opportunity today.
Thank you. Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. So every CAZ in the country is different. Bath, Bristol, Birmingham, Bradford, Manchester, all completely different because of government failure to address clean air nationally. It's a sad state of affairs that the Tories are running scared of their own policy, but I guess that's a luxury of opposition. It is cowardly politics hiding away from their own legal statutes that they passed in Parliament, a Parliament that Tories run with an 80-seat majority. It's a dishonest way of running the country, but something which is becoming all too familiar to the people of this country. This government do not care about the north of England. They do not care about taxi drivers. They do not care about our children, but we do. And it's all well and good bringing motions to full council. We all know the real work is done in committee meetings which are less glamorous and less well reported on. Now, I've had countless meetings about the government clean air zone over the last year, and it's Labour councillors who have been asking for those meetings, Labour councillors who have been making the case for taxi drivers, Labour councillors who have been passing on concerns of government, of councillors and residents. Other councillors in this chamber have not raised this issue with me, and as a result of Labour councillors' effort, we've pushed back to government and said we were worried about the impact on our poorest communities. Could we have a non-charging CAZ? They said clearly no, because in their opinion that would have no impact on reducing the illegal levels of pollution. They said they couldn't remove the obligation of a clean air zone in Bradford, but to compensate, they give us the biggest level of grant seen anywhere in the country, and exemptions, which would mean our small businesses would not be affected. Where were you in those meetings? Where were you pushing back on your government's policies? I can tell you Labour councillors behind me have been lobbying hard for the people of the district. They put in the hard yards of arguments, pushing for concessions, standing up for taxi drivers and residents. I hear from them what people think, but no other councillor raised the issues with me about government. Where were you? We've written letters to government. We've asked questions of DEFRA. We've pushed for ministers to hear our concerns. Where are your letters? Where are your conversations with government? I've even cornered Rebecca Powell, the responsible minister, at a flooding meeting to tackle her on the clean air zone. And incidentally, Tory MPs from across the region were there, but our two Tory MPs were absent. They were no-shows. And as usual, leaving the council to stand up for the whole district on our own without their support. Where were you? Nowhere. Your representatives on those committees were voting for the CAZ silently without making any representation. But you come here today spouting warm words to get something on social media playing to the gallery. The time has gone. The decisions have been made before today in Westminster. Show us your letters to government asking for changes to this clean air zone. You can't because you didn't write any. You didn't speak out. This is no decision to make in this chamber today on CAZ. You know that. You speak now for show and not to make a difference. Now, Bradford's been badly hit by cuts from this Tory government. They've made our children's health worse. They've made our incomes lower. How can anyone outside this chamber, or inside in fact, vote for a Tory government which makes Bradford poorer, our children sicker, and then pretends that they're against their own government's policy? With Tory spin like this, the whole load of misinformation and false rumours out there. First of all, myth busting. 83% of our taxis are now compliant and will not pay a penny in charges. This CAZ does not affect any private passenger car in the district. You don't have to register. Businesses can have 3 non-compliant vans which will be unaffected by the clean air zone, so most businesses won't pay a penny. You don't have to change your vehicle if you're in business. And where someone has a new compliant vehicle on order, the old vehicle will not be charged in the clean air zone until the new vehicle arrives, no matter how long that delivery takes. Those are concessions that we have in Bradford because of our pushback and not yours. Those concessions are hard fought for, and they're not being allowed for any other place in the country. Tories achieve nothing for Bradford districts. Never have, never will. It's your government, your money, your bankrupt politics. Own them.
Councillor Cameron Hussain, please. Quiet, please.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and can I welcome you to that chair and also send my thoughts and prayers to our Lord Mayor, Councillor Shabir, and hope he has a speedy recovery. Deputy Lord Mayor, it's important that we tackle pollution and dangerously poor air quality across the district that threatens the health of our children, which is why I support the principle of the clean air zone. But I make no secret about the fact that I was profoundly concerned about the government's rollout and the disproportionate effect that it would have on small and medium-sized businesses, and in particular the taxi and private hire sector. Anyone who has ever spoken to me about this issue knows that I will make no bones about my concerns, which is why I have spoken to the leader on countless occasions and I have raised my concerns with her. The clean air zone is forced upon us by this government. We absolutely need to have a protection in place to support those who are going to be hit the hardest by this policy, such as those in taxi trade, small businesses and tradesmen. And I have been pushing for this relentlessly for years now. I've also done this without the support, and let me make this absolutely clear here today. I've done this without the support of members sat across this chamber today, and I've done this on my own and colleagues from this side of the chamber. And as a result, I can simply not believe the audacity of the Conservative members here today. If you were so concerned about the clean air zone, if you were so concerned about the livelihoods of small businesses, then you would clearly be attending those committee meetings. You will be attending other seminars and places like this. I've never seen any of you attend those, seminars. And I'll tell you today here, the only people that I remember seeing on those seminars and those committees is Councillor Mohammed Amran, who fought with me on this campaign, and other Labour colleagues here who made sure that they stood up and they made their voice count for the people and their district. Not only are the Tories now jumping on a bandwagon, Deputy Lord Mayor, but they seem to have forgotten that it's their party that issued this government directive in 2018 that forced Bradford Council and local authorities across the country to implement Clean Air Zone in the first place. And they seem to have forgotten that it's their party's failure in government to address the climate emergency and air pollution that has seen cities across the country in breach of legal air pollution limits. So I won't take no lectures, from people sitting on that side of the bench today and explaining to me that how CAZ should be run in the district. And especially I won't be taking any kind of lectures from any other individuals in the room who claim to be experts on CAZ as well. The people who are going to be affected by this, we have been out, we have spoken to them, and we have made sure that those voices have been heard. Now, this is a blatant hypocrisy with Tory members when they're happy to distort the truth and misrepresent their position, telling people in Bradford that they're opposing the CAZ while forcing it upon us in government. However, this is not, without form. Let's be honest, we've seen this before. The Tory members happy to lay into Bradford Council over spending cuts when, again, it's their government who have hollowed out Bradford Council finances after a decade in power in Westminster. And it's their government who have cut the grants and funding settlements into Bradford, forcing us to make these devastating cuts in the first place. Deputy Lord Mayor, unlike the two-faced say one thing, do another Tory members opposite, I have been and always will be a proud champion for our taxi and private hire trade and our vibrant small and medium businesses who are the backbone of our local economy. Whilst I stand in solidarity with the taxi trade and with small businesses, I will not be voting for this hypocritical Tory motion. Instead, I call upon the Tory members to stop grandstanding and take some real action. Lobby their own party ministers in power who have the ultimate responsibility for this policy to demand the delay they're calling for today. And stop using, please, stop using taxi drivers and small businesses owners as political pawns in their small political game. Please stop using them.
Thank you, Cameron, for that. Are there any more speakers?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I will remember there's a microphone in here, so I'll watch out. After speaking with many of my constituents, they have concerns on how this will affect businesses using vehicles within the CAZ zone, businesses operating within the CAZ zone that rely on customers driving to them, and how the traffic will be pushed out of the CAZ zone into areas like the one I am here representing today of Queensbury. Myself and other constituents of the ward feel that money would have been better spent on improving the traffic management, which would result in a better flow of vehicles, decreasing emissions of stationary vehicles. Local businesses will still require to travel through the CAZ zone to attend a job, a place of work, a customer site, builders, merchants, suppliers, depot and so on. If these businesses will still be driving through the CAZ zone, how will this benefit emissions levels in Bradford as the volume of vehicles would remain or could remain the same? Whilst we're on the subject of small businesses being penalised, why is it fair for the businessman or lady who drives a reasonably small emission vehicle to pay a daily charge who is building up the economy, where on the other hand, a private car with emissions of potentially over £450 plus a year road tax using their car to drive for leisure doesn't contribute towards this congestion scheme? Deputy Lord Mayor, why is the shape of a vehicle determining who pays the congestion charge instead of an emission chart based? Why is a painter and decorator who travels to a place of work in a small van adding to the economy being penalised when someone who can afford to pay £450 plus of road tax to drive around all day? This painter and decorator, who is also a local resident, has advised me that he will be changing their car to an estate just so they don't have to pay the congestion charge. How many people are going to change their vehicle to an estate which could potentially be more pollutant than the van they originally had? Deputy Lord Mayor, again, I have friends who have small vans that they want to use their rear of the van for using their bicycles at weekends, not because they are a business. The scheme has not been thought through correctly. People are being penalised of the shape of a vehicle instead of the emission-based traffic will be sent to other parts of Bradford, including the ones I represent today, just to miss the driving through the zone. I also know that many builders in the ward. I also know a builder in the ward where they are now opting to drive to the neighbouring town of Halifax to a builder's merchants, not to drive through the CAZ zone. This also brings risk to those businesses operating within the zone itself. We understand that Bradford. Sorry. I did. Okay. Thank you.
Can we be quiet, please?
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Let's hope you don't come off the 5-minute timer, eh? We understand that Bradford deserves a cleaner, healthier breathing space. A better solution would have been to improve the flow of traffic and not penalise people trying to improve the city. You only need to visit Wakefield Road to understand how a flow of traffic can be affected when removing one lane from a road. Another waste of money spent just like the scheme, and another Labour-led reason for people to avoid Bradford. Maybe issues like this should have been looked at first instead of penalising businesses. The most sensible suggestion on the table is the Conservative motion, so Bradford South Independents will be voting with them.
Is there any more speakers wishing to speak? No. Councillor Ferriby, do you wish to use your right of reply?
I'll pass my right to reply to Councillor Hinchcliffe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. So I think councillors need to equip themselves with the information and the facts about this. you're not having the right discussions with residents to actually tell them what the truth is about this. 84% of taxis are now compliant. If you've got a business, you can have 3 vehicles that don't have to be compliant. You don't get charged at all. If you've got a van as a private citizen, you'll be able to register for exemption for that. This is not meant to penalise people. This is meant to support people, because we've pushed really, really hard because we know how difficult this is, and we know how difficult it is government imposing this on us. Secondly, Councillor Davis, you question how much pollution impacts on children's health, and I mean, this is getting back to Victorian times when we put children in factories. Basically, there are 74.2 children per 100,000 in England are admitted with emergency asthma admissions to hospitals. In Baildon, that's 32 per 100,000. In Great Horton, that's 285 per 100,000. It has a massive impact, does pollution on children's health. None of us in this debate should try and negate that. That is a fact. Again, facts, not fiction. You criticise us for pausing it, and then you tell us to pause it again. By the way, that's not in our gift, but the logic of your motion just doesn't make sense. Air quality is still poor throughout the district. We have to show our figures to government. Government are telling us those are still illegal levels of pollution in this district. And actually, you know, the biggest polluters are people, vans, big lorries, who come into Bradford, go out the other side without stopping, without contributing, polluting our district without contributing a single penny to our government, our district's economy. We cannot be used as a motorway. Bradford's a destination place. Let's make sure that it's a good place for people to live and work. And government, frankly, don't care about Shipley Eastern Bypass. If they did, they'd have given us more than £300,000. It's not actually anything to do with clean air. But we are trying to get the best deal out of a government that doesn't listen to anything we say as a district, and that's been proved time and time again. I urge you to support our motion, talk to the government more frequently, and get the best deal for Bradford residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis, do you wish to use your right of reply?
Yes, please, Deputy Lord Mayor. Thank you. Firstly, I want to challenge the comments that we have done nothing on this side until now. I personally have raised concern on this issue at several meetings over the past few years, including at public seminars, executive meetings, full council. I've raised it with my MP, and I arranged a meeting directly with the council's Clean Air Plan manager. I know other councils on this side have similar concerns and have taken these matters up. So it's totally untrue to say that we've done absolutely nothing and we're just jumping on some bandwagon. We've been going on about this for years. Secondly, on the health issues, I don't often bring my personal life into this, but I have asthma, and my child was actually one of the emergency admissions with wheezing. I don't not understand that that's an issue, but I just don't believe that this is going to solve those problems. Thirdly, with regard to the remarks to the effect it was the Conservative government that mandated a Class C charging zone, I have to repeat that it did no such thing. It did not mandate it. It merely accepted the proposal to impose one made by this council. Rather than taking statements from the executive at face value, can I ask members opposing our motion to look at the answer to parliamentary written question reference number 35575 laid before Parliament on 27th of July last year, which said, Bradford has identified that a Class C clean air zone is needed in order to deliver the legal obligation to tackle nitrogen dioxide exceedances in the shortest possible time. Government considered the business case submitted by Bradford earlier this year and has accepted Bradford's evidence that a Class C clean air zone is required. The answer also stated, given the potential impacts on individuals and businesses, when considering between equally effective alternatives to deliver compliance, Government has been consistently clear that if a local authority can identify measures other than charging zones that are at least as effective at reducing nitrogen dioxide to legal levels, but with less of an impact, these measures should be preferred. I just can't believe what I'm hearing from the other side, anyway, that's that.
Point of order, Lord Mayor, Deputy Lord Mayor. So just point of order, Deputy Lord Mayor. So that question, I saw that question. That was a planted Tory MP question to a Tory minister to get the answer they want for a Tory leaflet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now move to the vote. Those in favour of Amendment 8, moved by Councillor Ferriby, please vote. Those against? That is carried. Amendment 8, moved by Councillor Ferriby, becomes a substantive motion. Those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. Motion 3, empowering local